Not literally, though, but in terms of the critical analysis of it. Let's dive into it, everyone. Joining us now is the author, Dr. Charles Omole. He's the author of Muhammadu Buhari, From Soldier to Statesman, the legacy of Muhammadu Buhari. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You've penned this and endorsed, and I've seen a lot of criticism. Intentionally, I read some of the last few chapters which are more political because you chronicled when he was as a soldier, young soldier. I mean, his parent is growing up after getting out of prison, returning to Dara. All of those years you wrote. I was a little bit more unconcerned about that one. I was more concerned about what his children think about when he was in office, his wife's perspectives, those who work around him and work with him. And there are a lot of controversies which I'm going to be raising with you tonight. But those who say, who wants to read a Buhari book? That those 8 years were wasted years. Those are what his critics are saying. That those years set us back, economically, for example, by 20 years.
Well, I mean, the truth is, whether the family liked it or not, different people are writing books on Buhari. You know, I mean, one was launched yesterday by the former Minister for Information. So I don't think there's anything wrong in hearing from those who actually know him best. Now, the book actually is a child of circumstance. It was not, I don't think it was planned, because the way it happened was the Arewa Consultative Forum did their 25th anniversary, I think sometime last month. There was a book written by John Peden on Buhari in 2014, and it was published early 2015. Apparently, they had bucket loads of those books left. I think, you know, thousands and thousands of them. So I think they approached the former First Lady, Excellency Aisha Buhari, that look, for the during the Arewa event, they want to represent that book to the public. I think it was at that point she said, hold on a second, that book was written in 2014, launched early 2015. It wouldn't have captured Buhari years properly. So she now thought, look, it's best to update that book and then represent the updated version. That was the initial scope of the book. Then, of course, you know, as I explained in the introduction to the book, you know, we couldn't find the electronic copy of the whole book, you know, all kinds of issues with, you know. So anyway, I ended up writing the entire book all over again. And then we gave it a new title and everything was different. So the point I'm making is, it wasn't the Buhari family sitting down and said, let's write a book. They approached them. Incidentally, part of Buddha approached them actually had links with the Cabal. So they approached them and said, look, we have thousands of this old book, let's represent it. It was the family's concern that we can't be representing a book that is that old. Let's get somebody to help update it.
So that's the origin of the book.
That's the origin of the book.
So there were actual cabals, as you found out and documented here. And those, I mean, I've asked that question severally when Nigerians raised it. With those who were close to President Buhari, at the time, some of us were seen and labeled as extremists and lefties, and that we hated the president when he was sick, because it was rather weird that we had a president who was not in office, who was sick, and everything was shrouded in some kind of secrecy. And because we've seen this happen in my life as a journalist, it was happening. That's the second time for a sitting president since 1999, and we were worried in the manner in which he was handled. There are a lot of people who were blamed when the issue of Yaradua happened. So there were questions. In fact, I had a countdown when Buhari left the country, and a lot of newspapers also followed suit in monitoring the welfare and the health of the president. And when we raised the issue about the Cabal, those who were close to the president at the time said there was nothing like a Cabal. There was no Cabal. But there were cabals, isn't it?
Oh, yes. I mean, the thing is this. Like I said in the book, every president since 1999 had his own cabal. Even the current one, in fact, the current one is slightly more complicated. He has more than one cabal. But I can unpack that later if you want. But every president has their own cabal. And cabal is not necessarily a bad thing, like I said in the book. If, you know, the cabals can become force multipliers, if they share the intention of the leader. So they can help magnify his program, help achieve much better things. But the problem comes when cabals have their own agenda. And that is the problem. But the particular problem with Buhari's cabal is, unlike every other president before him, cabals were friends, associates, technically people you could dismiss.
And family members.
A few.
I mean, because we thought that the biggest and perhaps the most with the one with a towering figure within the Buhari circle was the Mamandara.
Yes, I was going to come to say
that. And you mentioned the relationship and why it became so prominent and why Buhari was so, it was difficult to separate those two men.
Yes, I mean, what we might not realize is that Buhari lost his father, I think, at the age of about 3 years old or so. The Mamandaras of this world were the people that he grew up with. I think Mamandara is a few years older than, Buhari. So these were the men he grew up with. They are kinsmen. These are people who probably growing up have sacrificed things for him. And he was a fairly loyal man. So clearly, once those people constituted themselves to a cabal, they were difficult to shake. And that, I think, is the problem Buhari had.
And perhaps what you ran away from easily here, what maybe you didn't capture or maybe I have not read, was how Buhari was comfortably able to allow people to run riots in their offices without... I mean, I've had minister on this program who said, in my years of serving Buhari, he never asked me a question about my role as a minister. That we didn't see much of here.
Well, two things. Number one, this book is not about policy, Buhari policies. It's about the man, Buhari. So reference to policies is as it relates to his thinking, about what he was thinking around that policy rather than the policy itself. Now, the thing is this, Buhari by nature, he delegates. Once he delegates, he allows you to do the work. But the problem, what people don't understand is that a lot of what he believed was going on was curated by people around him. I mean, for example, there are things I actually did not include in the book that I felt were probably too hot to put in the book.
Like what? The subject matter, without having to state the details if they are difficult to say.
For example, one of the things about Buhari is that he loved reading newspapers. Everybody knows that, right from, the early days, he was a newspaper man. And there were reports that the Cabal went to the extent of curating his own newspaper for him.
A version of the newspaper.
Yes, that would plant stories they want him to read.
And and perhaps, there are those who even say that this happened to not only President Buhari, that in fact it may be happening to the present president, that he may not be seeing the actual news, and he may not be reading the actual newspaper, and that leaders in that form and shape and height get to the point of being fed with whatever those who are around him and managing them wanted.
That is true. The challenge, of course, with someone like Buhari is there's one overarching cabal. But in the current government, there are multiple cabals, and that, I think, has its plus and minus in the sense.
So there's a possibility that a president may not know what is happening in the country for 3 days.
Of course.
Because everything is teleguided.
Even the channels he watches. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Everything is
teleguided, is being managed in a way that those who are around him. And that's why the name of Tunde Sabiu, for example, came up. As his level of education, his experience, those who, they say, controlled what went on, who saw the president, what kind of... in fact, the daughter of the president wrote, who somewhat is... what's it called?
Forensic auditor.
Yeah, and went and discovered that some of the signatures of the president in documents were forged.
That's correct.
And that's how powerful some of the people around the president. So it's not the fault of some of these presidents sometimes. It could be the fault of those who are managing them, is it?
That is true. I mean, the thing is, president will always have people around him. But you need to put systems in place to avoid state capture or presidential capture, for want of a better word. Because, for example, the current government have, from what I can see, at least 5 cabals.
Within the presidency?
Yes. And the interesting thing about one of the cabals actually is headed by the president himself, based on my own analysis. Because if you're looking at the word cabal are people who are proximity to power and who have the ability to influence policy and decisions. You know, so in this current administration, you have at least 5 groups all fighting.
Who are these groups?
Okay, if you're talking about the 5 Cabal, number 1, there is the Chief of Staff group.
That's Femi Ojabiamila.
Yes, and by that I mean not just him, people who are in close circle.
In that, yeah.
You had Wike to that, you had NSA to that, and you know people who are in the circle. That's one. Number 2, you have the Sheyi Tinubu's, you know, pathway. That's another.
The boy is that powerful.
Oh yes, and also people he helped to put in government. So that forms another group. The 3rd group, of course, is the First Lady. You can't rule that out. You know, she has her own team. You know, the 4th group is a group of the young Turks around the president, the principal private secretary, the AO, you know, the CSO. Those ones that control access. You know, those ones, you know, that they form their own cabal. And then the 5th cabal, which the president head himself, actually are what I call the geriatrics. There are quite a few old people that have influence on the
that he listens to.
That he listens to. So
some of them, I understand, some of them are even complaining that I've not seen him in a long time. They are not allowing us to see him.
No, what you see there is a conflict of cabal. You know, part of the danger of having multiple cabals like that is decision making is slower. Because once one cabal pushes a decision, the others fight against it. And then, you know, it takes a while for the man to make a decision. And there's a problem. Whoever gets to the president first, and when he hears the story and take action, probably will get the upper hand. I think that's a problem generally with old people, generally. You know, I mean, for those of us who have old people in the family, the first person to report tends to be the innocent party, you know. So that's what happened.
But the cabalism,
yes.
If I may put it that way, is it so obvious in the Tinubu government? There are those who are saying that a lot of things that are happening, like Wole Soyinka complained about Sheyi Tinubu's convoy, and in fact this evening Alanda was in one part of town and he still has that number of, and that those who say nobody would ever complain about such a thing and the president wouldn't have taken action. So literally, some of the cabals are so powerful that even the president doesn't have the power to control them.
Well, not that he doesn't have the power to control them. It's whether, number 1, is fully aware of what they are doing. That's number 1. But I think one of the skill of this current president is how, you know, he's kind of almost using one cabal against the other, so they shop each other.
They play the politics.
Yes. So I mean, you will underestimate Ashwaju at your own peril. He's a very skillful politician. So all those people around him, they're all exerting influence, but he knows what's going on across the different ambits. But the challenge is decision making is a lot slower because. Take appointments, you know, a name will be put there, you check the same list 1 hour later,
it's gone.
The name has changed.
And it happened a lot under Buhari.
Yes. You know, well, I mean, the thing is, under Buhari, you know, the cabal had a lot of influence. I couldn't get to the bottom of how powerful they were. Let me give an example. Because even after I stopped being president, there's a story of when he was going to come to England. For this last treatment that he had. The wife got a place, prepared it, and then left the key with the concierge and the name of one of her husband's security details to say, look, give them the key, and that's and she left. Only for her to find that by the time the husband arrived in England, the cabal have rented a completely new place for him. He never went to where they were prepared. You know, so that's an example.
But even after the relationship between both of them, Aisha Buhari and Muhammadu Buhari, at some point, you will discover that they come to the public and it's as though the home front wasn't exactly perfect. What went wrong from your discovery?
Well, I don't think in terms of home front, when you say, I'm not quite sure, in terms of whether I didn't see any evidence.
Let me give you an example.
Yes.
And that, for example, your record about Buhari's decision or his choice of who becomes the next president. Have you seen Babafemi Ojudu's write-up? Babafemi Ojudu disagreed. He said the actual fact that he's privy to is that Oshibajo, the former vice president, approached Muhammadu Buhari a minimum of 4 times that he can recall. And at those different times, Buhari said yes in affirmation to Oshibajo's ambition to want him to become president. And he had promised and voted his support for Oshibajo, and which a lot of people around Oshibajo and those who are in the know felt that was the biggest betrayer of the 8 years Oshibajo served Muhammadu Buhari.
Well, that's not my own my own recollection of the facts as I was told. Really is, it's a question. The answer Buhari will give you, I think, depends on the question you ask. Should I contest? That's a question. I want to contest. That's another question. So clearly, if you are coming to me to say I want to contest for the presidency, I probably will support you. If you ask me, should I contest? That probably will get it slightly different.
That may be to a large extent a scenario where the likes of Rotimi Amechi will tell you his own story about what he told him about his ambition and the audacity of him resigning and say now because he's one of the closest we understand to Buhari. And Ahmed Lawan also will tell you a story about what went on with communication with Muhammadu Buhari. So that those who say maybe the man was a bit sly and never upfront about what he thinks politically, especially to those who are close to him. Some of those who see it as a betrayer.
No, I don't think Buhari's intention was to shut down anybody's ambition. Like I said, if you come to him and say, I've thought about it, I want to contest, he probably will give everybody, the same kind of blessing he gives to one, he gives it to all. But if I'd approached him and said, I'm thinking of contesting, should I? What do you think, Mr. President? His answer probably would have been different. So I'm not sure. I mean, in terms of all the facts I've seen, anyone went to him asking whether they should contest.
Yeah.
But I think they went to him saying, I'm thinking of contesting.
Right. Let me take you quickly onto some interesting part of this book. Buhari was poisoned by gas infiltration in his office. Was that the case?
Not
from the record.
Not to my knowledge. No, that was not.
How did he get sick?
Well, I mean, the fact was that for decades before even he got to the villa, Buhari had a particular regime in terms of his health. Certain vitamins he takes, he eats at a particular time, and all that. And that had been managed very well. And I think what happened was when he got to the villa more or less told the wife had a meeting with all the key stakeholders. And they more or less told her to back off, that is now Nigeria's property. So they took over everything. So the regime she had explained to them, they didn't follow it. To the point where sometime for months, they discovered that the president wasn't eating lunch. He was just walking through lunch. So clearly his health began to deteriorate because that pattern wasn't followed. Meanwhile,
Aisha and the family have been managing him over the years.
They've been managing.
What about the story of the gas, attack in the office? And you hear a lot of stories. And the rat infestation, and how the office was being renovated shortly around that period was when he started becoming sick. And that those indication that there must have been something untoward.
You see, the thing is, there are a few categories of things I left out from the book. Number one, things that I felt were too hot.
And sensitive.
I did not include in the book.
And you don't want to be in DSS custody?
No.
For revealing state secret.
Exactly. Well, that's not really my concern. I mean, as a lawyer, I know what to say, what not to say.
Yeah.
So, but that's the one. The second thing was that things I couldn't corroborate. When I went around, things that were single sourced, I did not include. So things like potential for gas poisoning, I did hear about it, but it was not corroborated. So I did not use any single source information. So anything I put in the book were things 3, 4, 5, 6 different people said at the same time.
But what killed Buhari?
Well, I mean, based on the medical evidence I saw, it's acute pneumonia. That was the official diagnosis of what killed him. Clearly, those who, I think from my own understanding, I think it's been building for over a period of time. Those who are close to Buhari, for example, will know that all along, whenever he laughs, he coughs. You know, so he's always had this coughing fit, you know, for many years. So clearly, I think when the pneumonia set in, it surprised everybody because in the 2017-2018 time, to the family, it looked more sick then than this time. So they knew it was sick, but they didn't think it was going to lead to death. So his death was really surprising.
It caught a lot of the family members by surprise.
Definitely.
And that's probably what was more painful. Absolutely. Because the man was of age, and of course, he'd gone through a lot of rigor in his lifestyle as a soldier, imprisonment, and even becoming president. That's one of the most difficult jobs anybody will ever ask for. But fundamentally, the children had some regrets, isn't it? That they captured it.
Yeah, see, the thing about, you know, I remember during the book launch, I said that one of the greatest legacies of Buhari actually are his children. Because initially, when I was approached with this project, I was expecting that maybe they would try to sort of paint their dad in a saintly color. I didn't get that. They were criticizing things I was criticizing. I mean, the children were saying that we told him, sack these people. You know, he refused to sack them. You know, that even if you're not going to sack them, change their portfolio. You know, they are not performing. So these were the things the children said. So they are not just painting. And, you know, did
they feel the father was stubborn?
Well, it's a general. I mean, Buhari is one of those people that is difficult to shake. Once he believes this is what he wants to do, everybody I know around him knows that it's difficult to shake him. And I think what makes it difficult is this, and this is what people need to understand when they read the book. You see, as a president, lots of people come to tell you things all the time. One of the guardrails that Buhari put around himself was you must bring evidence. Oh, Shehu is stealing money. Okay, where is the evidence? If you cannot show him evidence, he doesn't act.
Dr. Omole, what do you think is the biggest lesson? Putting this together, the Buhari, with his frailties as human, as we all do have, his perfection in his expertise as a soldier and as a leader, and his politics, what do you think the nation can take away from the life and times of this man, Muhammad Buhari, no matter how much you hate or like him?
First of all, the book is actually a sympathetic book on Buhari. If you, those who read it, when I see all the online comments, clearly, you know, they've not read the book. You know, it's a 600-page book, and you're all talking about 5 pages of some tittle-tattle. But in terms of the biggest lesson, and this lesson is this: I know Nigerians like fixating on who our president is. I think it's time we start fixating on who he surrounds himself with. You see, because in the end, who the president is may become irrelevant if you look at the kind of people, because all the people that formed the Cabal were with Buhari before he won the election. So there were not some new people that came from nowhere.
And same with Bola Tinubu.
Exactly. So that's my point.
The quality will determine the outcome and the benefit. So that's a big lesson.
It's a big lesson.
So we need to always, as a people, start dissecting the kind of people.
Exactly.
And Tinubu is very easy to analyze. His commissioners are still with him. Dele Alake, Cardoso. Just a few of them who were with him are not with him any longer. A lot of those guys.
But Tinubu is very smart. There are some things
as an individual.
As an individual, he's an extremely bright guy. And the reason I'm saying that there are things I can't say. You know, many times Tinubu calls you in as his cabinet and asks you a question. Know that before he called you in, he knows the answer.
Give it to him. He's probably one of the smartest.
Testing like whether you're honest.
People, one of the people who are close to him. And sometimes they say when you sit down with him, he make analysis. France, Germany, the UK, the economic experience. He has vast experience and is very intelligent. Those who are around him will say to you. But in all of this, your own experience, let's capture it so that we can go. In writing this.
Well, my own experience really is that, you know, the family number one, they did not set out to, I just told you it was incidental. Because people write as though they sat down and said, let's write a book. No. Yeah. Circumstance came, they felt, something needed to be written. That's number one. Number two, they did not shape editorially what came out. It just said, go and talk to the people. And what came out is what came out. But one thing people need to understand is this. You cannot be more Catholic than the Pope. You cannot love Buhari more than his children, more than his wife. So all these people online going on about...
They need to read the book.
They need to read the book to understand, to get a fuller picture.
I must say congratulations to you, Dr. Charles Omole, for any academic or any creative who sit down to put this together. It's not just thoughts. This is a research, and this is a work of collation of interviews. Thanks so much indeed for your time and for your gift to the nation. Dr. Charles Omole, a lawyer and the author of From Muhammadu Buhari, From Soldier to Statesman, The Legacy of Muhammadu Buhari. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thanks for having me.